objectivity. And if you look into the commonly measured, or commonly measured variables, we can see just in the first 4 boxes here that actually not many of those tick all of them. So all come with their sort of inherent weakness. And looking into critical power, whilst it is ticking all those boxes, and this comes from the textbook by Jones et al. In 2009, we can see that it's in this edition, critical power is not okay for field testing, and it is not athlete friendly. So we're going to make a strong argument here that in a new edition that these boxes are hopefully going to be ticked, and that athletes are able, and coaches, practitioners, and researchers are able to use critical power as a regular measured tool in the laboratory and in the field. So let's go a little bit into the basics of critical power. Is when we perform in looking into endurance performances, when we are sort of in tune with an intensity at which we perform, whether we cycle, we run, we row, we swim, whatever that sport might be, that mode of exercise might be. I think we are all familiar with this moment where we really feel in tune and we feel like we could run forever. However, when just accelerating a little bit, slightly going marginally faster or cycle a little bit harder, then we start to feel, or we can perceptually really feel this is not as good as any longer, and physiologically we are starting to accumulate fatigue. Now this in theory is literally the critical power model. However, in the original definition, critical power was actually modeled as an intensity that was maintained indefinite, and of course that is not the truth. However, it describes this intensity at which we literally perform at a maximal steady state or thereabout, and if we go a little bit above it, we are starting to accumulate fatigue, and it results in exhaustion. So what is that relationship between this intensity that we feel so comfortable with and a tolerable duration that we are able to sustain? And I'm sure people have, some of you have seen this, Abe Hill, one of the pioneers. In 1925, he plotted world records over different sports and different distances, and he found this sort of hyperbolic relationship between the speeds that were performed for the given sport and the distance covered. So there is a very distinct relationship between those scenarios, and Abe Hill consequently formulated, and that was the idea of his research, the first ideas of fatigue, which were associated with short, violent efforts. There were these three associations: short, violent efforts, sort of more moderate intensities, and then what he called wear and tear over long distances. Now, when we plot this, and I've done this, I just went into Wikipedia and took out all current world records in track cycling over 200, 250 meters, 500 meters, and so on and so forth, up to the 1 hour record. We can also formulate this scenario linearly, and we can see it is an absolute relation, the perfect relation between time and distance covered, making this concept, I think, quite exciting about what is going on here. So the history of critical power was formulated then later on with Monod and Scherer in 1965, who didn't look into the causes of fatigue, but they looked into the relationship between workload and time to fatigue, and using at the time a single muscle group. Moritani in 1981 then consequently translated this into whole body exercise. So this is just a little bit of the history of the critical power concept. So let's dive into the physiology of critical power slightly. There are, when you look into the literature, various definitions that are cruising around. However, they all have a fairly common denominator. So when we model it, what does it come out of? Critical power currently in the current literature, and this is only written by Paul et al. in 2016 in the current review on this topic, is defined as the greatest sustainable metabolic work rate that results in so-called wholly oxidative energy metabolism. So it is, and this was also done previously, it is closely linked to the maximal lactate steady state. However, we do know that critical power sits slightly above it. Critical power is conceived as an intensity at which when we perform it, we do not elicit VO2 max, and it also demarcates, and all these definitions somewhat provide an argument for the usability of critical power as a research topic and as a topic for coaches to work with. Demarcates the boundary between the heavy and the severe exercise intensity domain. I will come back to this in a moment at the end of it, because we're going to look briefly in how coaches can use this as well. Now, critical power doesn't just, when we test critical power, does not just result in the determination of critical power itself. It also gives us an additional value called W prime. W prime in the Monod and Scherer work was defined as, or we called at the time, anaerobic work capacity. However, we do know now that it is not solely anaerobic, that there is some oxidative phosphorylation going on, and it was consequently then retermed as W prime. Now, W prime has attracted